Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel, a special edition of Longhorn Weekly because the AP Top 25 is out and Texas is number one. We'll talk about the AP poll and much more on this edition of Longhorn Weekly. This edition brought to you by Duck Camp. We'll tell you more about Duck Camp here later in the show. But CJ, that's the breaking news off the top. The AP Top 25 just dropped. For the first time in school history, Texas will open the season as the number one team in the AP Top 25. Your thoughts?
Well, as if we couldn't get more excited for the season, Texas has them number one by their name, Jeff. That's exciting first and foremost, but beyond that, it just adds to the expectations, right? You know, we've talked about it coming into the season after a year in which double-digit guys get drafted once again. That expectations are sky high, right? You get Arch Manning as your full-time starter. This is a really talented team. The expectations are as high as ever. But it's a cool feather in the cap for Texas to be the number one team in the country. And I think it's deserved. I think, of course, when you look at Ohio State, you look at Georgia, Penn State, Clemson, that's kind of the top five in my eyes. Who remains the top? That's going to be the big question mark. Again, in the last 21 years, only one preseason number one team in the country, Jeff, has ended up winning the national championship. That's the task Texas has ahead of itself right now. Let's see if they end up becoming team number two.
Yeah, I'll get to the big picture here in just a second, but I think it's key to note that Texas is the first program not named Clemson, or Georgia, or Alabama to be number one in the preseason AP poll since Ohio State back in 2015 when the Buckeyes were coming off of winning the first college football playoff. You mentioned it right there, CJ. It's not a great track record of preseason number ones that have gone on to win a national championship. In fact, I went back to the start of the BCS era with the 1998 season. Since then, 27 teams before Texas have started the season number one in the AP poll. Only 3 of them have gone on to win the national championship. Florida State in 1999, USC in 2004, and then Alabama in 2017. Obviously, that was the Tua to Devontae Smith walk-off over Georgia in the Dome. But the good news is, CJ, that might sound daunting, and I think even in the era of the 12-team playoff where you've got to win more high-leverage games, it's even a little more daunting to go win a national championship. But of those 27 teams, 14 of them either won or shared a conference championship at the end of the season, and all of them except one, that was USC in 2012 when Lane Kiffin and Matt Barkley just had a disastrous season. All of them except that USC team won at least 10 games. So there's a bar if you're the preseason number one team that you're not guaranteed to clear it, but you're pretty close to guaranteed to clear it, at least competing for a conference championship, winning double-digit games. And in the case of Texas, CJ, that should have you in Atlanta playing for an SEC championship. But if that's the case, you should, at least the first year of the 12-team playoff showed us this, if you're playing in that SEC championship game, you're probably a lock to be in the playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this is the expectation is that you have a talented football team. I keep going back to expectations because that's really what this does, is it sets those expectations. Going into the year as the number one team, you should have a solid roster with a lot of depth. And, of course, the high-profile players. Texas has plenty of them at the moment, Jeff. So that's really where you should see yourself at the end of the year. Will Texas go poll to poll? Probably not, right? It's a daunting schedule. Again, Texas will play 5 teams ranked in the top 20. And let's go through those real quick because Ohio State, Jeff, you mentioned it to me right before we got going. We were robbed of that number 1 versus number 2 season opener in Columbus. The Buckeyes come in at number 3, Georgia at number 5, Florida to open SEC play for the Longhorns is at 15, and then Oklahoma and Texas A&M coming in at 18 and 19. So, hey, they missed the 20s there, but Texas with 5 teams in the top 20 on their schedule to begin the season. And all in all, look, that's the excitement factor, right? All 5 of those games are going to be must watch if you're a college football fan. If you're a Texas fan, without question, the 5 biggest on this schedule.
I want to talk about the big picture. And Longhorn fans, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to us, the royal we, everybody watching this, listening to it. I'm already seeing it, CJ. Oh, I'd rather end the season number 1 than start there. You got the target on your back. You know what? Embrace this. This beats the hell out of some years in the Charlie Strong and Tom Herman era where you're figuring out, man, can this team win enough games to make it to a bowl? You are the preseason number 1 team in the country. And regardless what you think about preseason polls and preseason rankings. If you think there's a kernel of truth into what they're eventually going to tell, or you think they're completely and utterly useless. You mentioned it a minute ago, CJ. This is a sign of respect for a couple of things. It's respect for a program that's made back-to-back trips to the college football playoff semifinals and has won 25 games with a conference championship over the last 2 seasons. It's respect for a roster that might be more talented, have fewer holes, and a higher NFL upside than any roster in the country. And it's respect for, you know what, Texas, you went into the SEC in year 1, even when people might have doubted you. You redeemed yourself almost completely. You went toe-to-toe with Georgia in a physical bloodbath of an SEC championship game. You lost in overtime, but you proved yourself worthy of being considered one of the upper echelon programs in college football right now. So, CJ, I would tell Texas fans to embrace the expectations. Don't shy away from them. If you're ever going to want to puff your chest out, this is the time to do it. And just bask in the glow that, Longhorn fans, you've waited so long for this, but you've got a team that at the start of the season, you can make a real argument that it is the very best team in the country.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And this is fun. Again, this is what the preseason poll is all about. I know that there's all sorts of arguments about whether or not the first poll should be released about week 5 or so. I enjoy these things. I know they don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but it makes for great fodder as we're currently having as well. I did want to have a little conversation here as well, Jeff, because the big point naysayers will have about Texas is, look, first-time starting quarterback, brand new pieces on the offensive line. We've documented that pretty well throughout the offseason, but I want to go through the top 10 real quick. Texas 1, Penn State 2, Ohio State 3. You got Clemson, Georgia rounding out the top 5, Notre Dame, Oregon, Alabama, LSU, and Miami. Look, a lot of brand new quarterbacks on this top 10. In fact, Penn State, Clemson, and LSU are the only 3 schools of the top 10 to have returning starting quarterbacks from a year ago. This makes for a season, Jeff, in which a lot of variables could change. And this top 10, really this top 20, about midway through the year could look completely flip-flopped.
Yeah, if I was going to put together a ranking of just who I think is going to end the regular season number 1 in the AP poll, I would probably put Clemson number 1, because if they beat LSU in that season opener, CJ, yeah, I think they've got the easiest path to going undefeated. Whether you're talking about Texas or Georgia, even throw Ohio State and Penn State in there, I think the Big Ten and the SEC, both leagues are so talented. They're so balanced. I think expecting anybody to go undefeated in either of those leagues, it is a tall, I'm not going to say impossible order, but it is very improbable to expect anybody to go undefeated in either of those conferences. When you talk about the inexperience that Texas has at those key positions, though, CJ, I will counter it by saying this. The 2025 season is the first, and you've still got a few guys lingering, but it's the first season we've had since the pandemic where guys with COVID eligibility, by and large, are out of college football.
Yep.
So you don't have these veteran-heavy rosters. Like, think about that Washington team that Texas played in the Sugar Bowl a couple of years ago. And we've seen some teams that are there might be some NFL rosters that weren't as experienced in terms of age-wise as some of these teams we've seen in college football the last few years. So, CJ, if there's ever a year to have some inexperience, to be a little bit young, this is probably it. Because if you're Texas, you're not that much different from everybody else. Like you said, you can look at Penn State, certainly Ohio State, go on down the list. Yeah, they might have experience at some key positions, but there are also some positions where they've got to replace some pretty high-level draft picks. So I think from an experience standpoint, it's not as much of a detriment to Texas as it might be in other years, because this is one of those years where everybody's dealing with it.
Yeah, and again, the variables could be all sorts of stuff, not to mention the one thing that is surprisingly unchanged from a year ago, Jeff, is, well, no coaches in the SEC were changed. No one fired. No schools made any changes in that regard as well. But the ultimate play on the field, led by quarterbacks, is where you're going to see a lot of these risings and falls for teams in the AP poll. ultimately Texas right now can't go any higher than they are. So that opener in Columbus, there's your number one team for the foreseeable future, barring whatever happens week 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, by the way, you probably at this point now got to go back to 2016, I believe it was, when you had number 1 Alabama and number 3 Florida State open the season. That was in Atlanta in the kickoff game, a neutral site. So a little bit different. I'm disappointed we don't open the season with AP number 1 and 2. But hey, if you ever want to lean on the coaches poll, even though I have my opinions on what the coaches poll is worth, this is the time to lean on it if you really want 1 versus 2.
That's exactly
go to that coaches poll. We'll get back to talking Texas football here in just a minute. But before we do that, I want to welcome back Duck Camp as an On Texas football sponsor this football season. Duck Camp gear is made for the people that live for the moments out there where there are fish to catch, birds to hunt, time to kill, and yes, football to watch. They like doing all that stuff, so they built a company centered on it, based in Austin and dedicated to giving people best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel. There are those of you out there who look forward to the opening day of deer season and the kickoff of Longhorn football with the fervor and excitement of a 5-year-old on Christmas morning, and Duck Camp is here to let you know that from opening day to game day, they've got you covered. Here's the great seasons, hunting and football. Shop duckcamp.com today for all of your hunting and fishing apparel needs. And again, welcome back to Duck Camp as an On Texas football sponsor this football season. CJ, let's look at camp really quick. We covered here on the channel and over at ontexasfootball.com heavily the intel coming out of Scrimmage 1 as Texas gets into this week. And again, the camp will, for all intents and purposes, be over after the second scrimmage on Saturday. They'll be full bore into game planning for Ohio State. One area of concern that I think a lot of Longhorn fans have, and I think as the On Texas football staff, I think we share it too to an extent. What do we make of the offensive line? I'm not going to say that I'm concerned about the offensive line or that the offensive line has had a bad camp because, again, like we've said, the best defensive front they see all year might be the one they're scrimmaging against right now. CJ, what do you make of where the offensive line is right now?
Well, that's kind of where it is, right? I do think this Texas front seven is as talented as a Georgia and Ohio State. Anyone that Texas will face this year, they were going against already in practice, right? They've been doing so since the spring as well. It truly is being baptized by fire. You know, they're getting tested immediately. And look, I think they're getting some exotic looks thrown their way as well. So as long as communication is there, I think you're going to see that pocket clean for Arch Manning. Obviously playing Ohio State, you're going to get tested and pressured immediately. Bo Atkinson's a really talented edge rusher that they brought in from North Carolina, by the way. But I want to hear more in that run game. And I think having a healthy CJ Baxter will certainly help. But there needs to be more movement. There needs to be more displacement of bodies in that front seven, climbing to that second level more efficiently as well. Because, look, Texas has some boulders in the middle of that defensive line, Jeff. It's the greatest unknown that offensive line is right now about this Texas team, and it's the biggest hindrance to keeping Texas from staying in that number one spot that we just talked about with the AP poll. Right now, the biggest unknown, it will be tested immediately, but I think a lot of the concerns stem from just having to play what we believe to be the number one or top defensive front seven in all of college football.
Yeah, I kind of look at the offense. I'll exclude the perimeter skill guys at wide receiver. And if you just look at the offense as an organism of the offensive line, tight ends, and running backs, when you look at the new pieces up front, you look at Arch coming into the season as a starter for the first time in his career, CJ Baxter and Christian Clark, by the way, both really, really good moments in Scrimmage 1. Both of those guys coming back off injury, the addition of Jack Andrews, the growth that we're already seeing and hearing about from Jordan Washington and Nick Townsend. I kind of look at that whole organism, offensive line, quarterback, tight end, running backs, as a group with tremendous upside that has a real chance. If they grow together the right way and get on an upward trajectory, CJ, as good as this team might look out of the box against Ohio State, and again, it's kind of a crapshoot. We don't really know what we're going to get game one, but however they look, the thought that, man, this group could be infinitely better by the time you get to the end of the regular season, that to me is the exciting part. So I'll give the offensive line, I'll call it what it is. I'll give them a little bit of a mulligan for whatever we might see, even if it's not great against Ohio State, because the potential for this group with Arch and the tight ends and the running backs to grow together could be off the charts by the time Texas lines up to play Texas A&M Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it will continue to improve as the season goes on. The one thing that I'm slightly worried about, Jeff, is we heard about it in the scrimmage, but 3-and-outs are going to cost this Texas team at some point. If you start stacking them, much like what we saw against Arizona State, if you leave your defense on the field time after time after time without much break in between, that's really where, even with all the depth, that's where you get into trouble and games really start to get away from you towards the back end. So if they're able to at least sustain some drives, take some time off the clock, that's going to be key, of course, to do so. That Texas offensive line will have to create some running lanes for whether it be Arch Manning, CJ Baxter, Trey Wise, or go down the list. But that's where I want to see the improvement from scrimmage 1 to scrimmage 2 this upcoming weekend.
That's a great thing to point out, CJ. And I will say too, nobody wants to see 3-and-outs, but if there is a positive spin you can put on that, Jack Bouwmeester's ability to flip the field from what we've heard in camp to this point, it is a night and day difference than what Texas got in the punt game last year.
Hey, folks are calling him Jack Bouwmeester, and I kind of like it, the way that he's booming it. We've heard great things so far. Of course, in all conference honoree in the Big 12 at Utah for a few years. This is the game-changing aspect Texas just quite didn't have a year ago. Hopefully, again, we don't need to see Jack all too much this year, but to have him in the arsenal is something that Texas, again, it should certainly help this defense as well.
A great net punting average with not enough punts to qualify for the National League is the kind of year you want to see from Jack Bouwmeester. CJ, as we wrap this up, let's talk a little bit of recruiting. Jake Krell getting ready to make his announcement. What's the latest on the talented edge rusher from IMG Academy?
Yeah, look, recruiting comes quickly, and it can flop quickly as well. Jake Krell right now trending a little bit back towards Oklahoma at the moment. In fact, that is where On Texas Football believes there's the most noise at the moment is coming out of Norman. This is one in which over the weekend, myself and Jerry Hamilton actually thought that Texas was in a really good spot for Krell. That has since flipped. And of course, in this NIL era, Jeff, it certainly sounds like anything can happen. And right now it feels like Krell is trending back towards the Sooners in this one.
All right, we'll keep tracking that for you here on the channel and over at ontexasfootball.com. CJ, thank you for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to the entire On Texas Football staff. If you're not a member over at ontexasfootball.com, now is the time to get signed up. Get over there and sign up using the promo code OTFOG. That's OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access on the site for $39.95. You don't want to miss it right now. We're talking some recruiting, but the lead up to, as of today, 19 days until the start of the regular season. You don't want to miss anything. Again, plenty of scrimmage notes over the weekend. Anything going on the 40 acres, we'll have it over on the site. Again, the promo code is OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access for $39.95. Don't forget to like this video and make sure you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or on the site, you've got the latest and greatest at your fingertips with what's happening on the 40 acres. For CJ, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, welcome.